Hey, hey, welcome back to Beyond the
What
Book.
up?
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Living the dream. Just about to talk about one of my favorite and most important topics when it comes to the first 30 days of
Street
things.
tacos. We're talking about street tacos today.
I mean, tacos could
Your
help.
second favorite. Your second favorite top. Oh, got it. Got it. Okay.
To be fair, street tacos, I think, could actually help in this topic if leveraged
Ooh.
correctly.
Ooh.
But
I'm
today,
interested now.
I mean, now I'm just hungry. It is Tuesday after all. So, in any case, welcome back to the third episode of the 30, 60, 90 series, specifically the 30 days slot of things. We've already talked about setting yourself up for success. We've already talked about different skills and specifically soft skills that you'll need to be successful. But the third thing that we get to talk about, which again, very excited about, is relationships. I don't mean your relationship with your mom and dad or your spouse or your friends. I mean professional relationships, which are a little bit of a different beast. There's some crossover with the
Yeah.
things when you're in your personal life, but one of those crossover topics could be tacos. We don't know yet, but we'll get into that.
Could be.
But the reason relationships are so important, and especially in your first 30 days, are they are going to basically be the make or break of your success within an organization. Every single day, unless you are, working somewhere where you are in a hole, just getting something done, you're probably working with other people, and there's probably somebody who's managing you, and there's probably someone who needs to approve everything you're doing. And so, people and the fact that you have to work with people is always going to be an important skill in the workplace. So, today, that's what we're talking about. When we're talking about relationships, there's kind of internal relationships and external relationships. Internal, putting it into a kind of synthesized way, you can think of it as your coworkers, your peers, your manager, and your leaders. When we're thinking about those folks, those are the people that, when you're working on a project, you'll interface with them all in different ways to ultimately get things done. And then externally, you have relationships. So vendors, different kind of clients or customers, if you're in a sales facing role, um, anybody that you might work with outside. That also includes the government for some people and in different roles. But those folks are external relationships, which you'll manage. For today, we're going to really focus on internal. External is pretty much like a 90+ day thing, unless you're in sales or a kind of more specialized role. But internal really impacts all of us, kind of no matter what role we're working in. At
Can
least
I
I
add
think.
really? Yeah. No. And I was gonna say I think in most situations I think a company or individuals that are responsible for your work probably want to wait and see whether you can represent the company or them or the brand well enough, which is why we're going to push that external lens out a little bit. And in many ways, you have to use your internal relationships to build that trust to let you speak to others. Because when you go and speak to others externally, you actually represent the company in many ways. And so there's just a level of comfort that your leadership will want to have.
I think what Ben's saying is he's very comfortable with me. And he's like, you know what? I want your face associated with my face on a podcast that's on the internet forever.
Now that you say forever, I was thinking maybe like a 5 to 10 year. Actually, we've known each other for 10 plus years. So what the heck is the point of forever? I
I
mean, that's
tell
just
you this,
a couple
dude, but
years away. So
15 plus years. We're old.
oh, that's right. Sorry. That's right. That's
But
right.
no, I guess so. This has been great. I guess this is my last episode. Ben does not want to see me anymore. So it's been real. Deuces. But
Depending
no,
on what kind of tacos you send me at the end, our relationship may change. Just kidding. All right, we'll
full
drop the
circle.
tacos.
Full
Tacos are
circle.
not required for a relationship, as you know, and this our relationship is totally different. Don't use our model. That's a horrible example.
We're the worst role models. So anyway, listen to our podcast. Okay. Ben,
Marketing.
marketing. Uh, I have officially marketed
There you
in the
go.
episode. But no, Ben. I think Ben. Contrary to popular belief, Ben is really good at some things. And one of those things is relationships. So tell us a little bit about how you think through relationships in
Yeah.
the work.
No. Thank you. Just going back a little serious here. Like ultimately, every job is a people job, and people crave connections and they crave community, and relationships are the lowest unit of which you can achieve that. So, why in the first 30 days? we all know relationships are things that are built over time. However, I think first impressions are not the only thing that matter, but can matter, especially in positive relationships. They set the groundwork for positive and successful relationships. So we want to introduce this topic to you all as you're starting your internships. Maybe you're actually 30 days into the dot and you're thinking about who it is you need to build relationships with. We want to arm you with that today. And just to use an analogy to cement this sort of long term, I've always been taught that relationships are like planting a seed of which the relationship tree will grow, of which one day you hope to sit under the shade. It's similar to the analogy we use in our networking episode, which you should go check out if you haven't already, in the core belief that it is a long term joint investment that takes time, but should bear fruit.
So what fruit does
Go ahead.
our relationship bear?
Al Pastor. Oh, pineapple, obviously. Pineapple
Pineapple.
and Al Pastor.
There we
Obviously.
go. There we
Although
go.
pineapples grow in bushes. All right, so we're stretching the analogy a little bit, but you kind of get what we're trying to say here. It takes time and it takes a level of intentionality. So that's what I'll be introducing today. It's a framework called PUT, as in put in the effort. And what it stands for is a sequential steps or a sequential set of steps that you do to approach a relationship. And I think what I'll invite Tyler to do is think about how to extrapolate some of these to different people you might need to build relationships with. So PUT stands for personal connections, mutual understanding or understanding, and then trust. So I'll start at the very top. Now, personal connections is not necessarily always a requirement in a professional setting, but many of the best relationships that you build start as people because in the early stages of your relationship, you don't know that person, maybe like a manager, like you don't know your manager's learning you. One of the easiest ways to build connection and community with your manager is shared ground. Something as simple as I like coffee, she likes coffee. We like to talk about coffee. Or they're a parent, I'm a parent. We like to complain about a lack of sleep that our toddlers give us. These are all things that don't necessarily build the meat of the relationship, but start you off at a place of understanding. They're more open to your approach to a relationship when you have a personal connection. So, how do we find a personal connection? This, thankfully, is no different than any other friendship or relationship. It's through exploratory conversations. In the professional world, we have things like LinkedIn or like an intranet page where people can express interest. You'll see interest groups. That's actually one really good way in LinkedIn. You can find groups that people are a part of, get a sense. It could be something as simple as alum of the same network schools. So there are a number of ways that you can discover what those shared topics are. And then it's up to you in the application to bring that up to say, hey, Tyler, it's great to meet you very, very first time. I hear that you went to Berkeley, you're a Cal Bear, go Bears, and that you are obsessed of Al Pastor tacos. Fun fact, me too. We should talk about a podcast or something. So just that alone could be the launch pad, but a personal connection cannot sustain a professional relationship, which is why it's first, but not a requirement. If so it does sustain you, it's probably more of a personal relationship or a friendship, and that's great too, but we're going to be focusing on professional today.
100%. I mean, just to kind of exemplify this a little bit, can you give me a situation where you found some surprising common ground with someone that became the start of a relationship?
Yeah, I absolutely, this is very top of mind. We just got a director in our team that's going to be handling AI, so very senior, very smart individual. And while we were talking about technology in our first one on one, I looked him up on LinkedIn and I saw that he was doing philanthropic activities on the side. Can you imagine a director, a father, someone who's really senior at Google has the time to do philanthropic nonprofit work? And without getting into the topic, it's work that's altruistic and good. And we have a nonprofit that we're a part of, Boba Talks. And so I actually brought that up and I said like, oh, it's really interesting. Where do you find the time? And then his response back was, where do you find the time? And I was like, actually, I think we might share the same passions, which is helping others. And he's like, yeah, exactly. And again, that's a really good example of just like, it buys you that additional open-mindedness, shared ground. And in my case, another one-on-one to chat about actual work stuff because we weren't able to get to it because we were talking about personal stuff. So these are the kind of things, like I wouldn't say I have a great relationship. I literally just started, but you can kind of see how having that personal connection could go a lot further than not having that personal connection. Just saying, I'm one of 50 meetings you have every day. You're not going to remember anything that I say, or quite frankly, I might be lost in the crowd. But now that I have this particular connection, he and I can talk about nonprofit stuff going forward.
I love that. And obviously, this individual is a leader, and so you've established that connection early on in the game with them being there. So we're kind of working a little bit backwards. I know we talked about peers, managers, and leaders, but I'll start at leaders for a second and just kind of punctuate what Ben's talking about here and the importance of it, which is with leaders, you obviously, to Ben's point, you don't get a lot of face time with them. And they're responsible for a lot of things in your career, despite the fact that you're not going to see them all the time. They're responsible for approving the work that you do. They're responsible ultimately for your performance reviews. At the end of the day, they're responsible for your compensation as well. So ultimately, these types of folks have a huge impact on your career and your life. And ultimately, to the point of building relationships, you want to be memorable to these types of people. You want to be the type of meeting that they actually look forward to because they have that shared interest with you. You want them to show up and to ask you the question like, "How's your philanthropic work going? Like, what else is going on?" And that is a sign of success with those types of folks before you actually even jump into the work. Because to Ben's point, like if you have that personal connection, there's just something else there above and beyond what you actually have to deliver. And ultimately, having that connection will just help in so many ways. Whether you just want to pick their brain on something, and normally someone who's inaccessible becomes accessible because they know you, or you actually are having an issue with one of your projects and you just want some help in addition to kind of, getting their feedback in more of an official capacity. So cultivating that relationship is great because the people who are normally far away from you might feel a little bit closer than you think. I'll work back to managers now. So with managers, similar kind of situation here in finding common ground. To exactly what I said about leaders having kind of that impact on your career, managers have that impact on your career as well as your day to day. Your manager relationship is really interesting because this is a person not only that needs to assign you work and kind of make sure that you're delivering, but at the end of the day, they're also there to advocate for you in your career and the things that you ask for and the things that you push for, the ideas that you have. So manager serves a really, really interesting role. And Ben and I have both been managers and had to navigate a lot of challenging things and a lot of great things. But at the end of the day, the people who have the best relationships with the managers, they're the ones who ultimately have the managers fight the hardest for them in a
Yep.
lot of ways. Um, and so to kind of, I guess, emphasize the importance of the personal aspect here, I kind of wanted to ask you, Ben, can you give me an example of a relationship you've had with a manager or a relationship you've had with a report and how that kind of impacted the way that you got things done or just kind of worked with that person?
Yeah. And I think it's never going to be the personal connection that yields successful relationship, which is why this is the first place to start, but it's not going to sustain. So I'm going to use this opportunity to segue into the second component, which is understanding. And I use this word very broadly. This is not a scientific approach, by the way. So I'm going to stretch the term understanding. But the way I think about the you in this model is part of a really strong relationship professionally is understanding two things at least, maybe more, but at least two things. One is what does that person want or need in the context of work, and how do they want or need that thing? So it's about customizing the specific communication you have to that individual. So it's intentionality within the context of the professional world. So let me give you an example. If I'm trying to cultivate a relationship with my peer and we are retail sales and cashiers, one of the things that I'm asking myself about my peer is what do they like to do? What do they not like to do? What do they excel at doing? And that's something that I'm kind of building. That's something I'm triangulating through peers and my manager and things like that. Who can I learn from? What drives them? Because when you talk to somebody, okay, let's use like our example, and then I'll come back to this sales example. But when I think about someone like Tyler, like I think it's more important that if I bring an idea to Tyler, that I have the broader, here's how I think about this and why I ended up at the approach. And I'm not worried about the details or fine tuning things because I know Tyler thinks in big picture and then works back to the detail. And so if I communicate with him the other way, it's not that we're going to have a bad relationship, but it's not going to be as strong as if I just simply customize my approach just a little bit. We're talking about the same thing, but customize that approach. Or if I have a peer in this retail example in which, hey, I'm the technologically savvy person and they're the more traditional, I know where each merchandise is on the floor. I might be able to coordinate with them and be like, you should take care of all the things that people are just looking for something in the store. And I can take care of all the things. And that makes her life easier because she's not stressing about using the computer. And it's because I'm just starting my first 30 days. I'm really not familiar with the store, but I know how to navigate this website well and use search terms well. Can I customize my approach with that person to build a better team? Or in a manager sense, it might look slightly different. How does my manager like to receive information? I'll use my real manager as an example. It's always bottom line up front. What is the actual destination you want the manager to get to? Then work backwards. Some managers, it's tell me the context, tell me the thinking, tell me how you approach it, and then tell me the. So it's a little change like that, using your understanding of what they need and how they need it, which can go a really long way. It's the difference between a team of 6, for example, a manager coming in, and I, as the manager, have to do all the work translating everything you tell me times 6 into a way that I can internalize and use it. Or 1 out of my 5 reports customizes it the way for me, and that builds goodwill with me. That builds that excitement you were alluding to of, oh, this is the one meeting that I don't have to do the translation. My direct is doing it for me. Now, is that the only thing that's going to build a strong relationship? No. But over time, it leads us to that third thing, which is trust, because it's much easier for me to understand what you need from me. It's much easier to avoid miscommunication because the communication is easy. These are all little things that build up into sprouting this large tree. So understanding is this broad term of just understanding the needs of the other party, because it's a two-way street, and also clarifying your needs, right? The more I communicate my needs very openly, the easier it is that they can kind of meet me there. But ultimately, this is the really critical piece of building a strong relationship.
Totally. And I want to get to trust because you started to allude to it, but I did want to also harken back to our soft skills episode a little bit to say
Yeah.
this a lot of these soft skills come in during exactly this moment, which is how do you understand what somebody needs? How do you match the energy? And at the end of the day, with these different folks who you're working with, I think we may have talked a little bit about elevations of kind of how you
Mm-hmm.
talk to folks within an organization, but all of that kind of comes into play here where you're like,
Yep.
hey, leader at this echelon likes information in this way, person at this echelon likes information in this way. I need to be able to float up here and talk like this. I need to be able to float down here and
Yep.
kind of talk in the details like this. And getting that range of motion in the way that you understand and reflect back kind of the needs of other people is massively important in being able to build these relationships, not only in a way that is effective for you, but also is durable for the way that you might have to interact with them in the long term. So I just kind of wanted to punctuate that with some of the soft skills work, but take us into trust because that kind of wraps a bow on everything that we're talking about here.
Exactly. If this is a triangle, that bottom foundation is all about trust. And that's why this is a long term activity, because you cannot build trust overnight or even over days. We're talking weeks and consistency. So, this is where I want to bring in using very clear examples for the 3 groups. And I'll actually pass it off to you to give some more examples. But like trust is such a broad category. It can mean and look very different to whom it is you're trying to build trust with. But at the end of the day, if P is about creating an open mind for that person to be like, we share common ground. Now I'm even more open minded to our relationship. And U is about the intentionality to customize your approach to relationship building to what that person wants slash needs. You're 2/3 of the way there, and so trust underpins everything. So how does one build trust? Well, it depends on what that person wants, especially wants from you, and that's why the individual you're building a relationship with is important. So to give some examples, if I'm trying to build trust with my teammate, it's going to look like dependability. It's going to look like if I'm out sick, I feel that my teammates have me covered. It's going to look like I trust you not to talk poorly about me to my manager. It's going to look like I trust you to respect my opinions and build this open space where we can share ideas within our group. And that, again, that's important. We all want trust. This is the lowest level of community building at the end of the day, which is trust. And so how you build that is going to be really obvious. It's sort of dependability is very straightforward. Like, are you a decent person? Can you actually are willing to pick up some slack if there ever is needed? Can you sort of depend on those people to reciprocate? Because if not, you're not going to have that relationship, right? You can have a personal connection. You all could have a mutual understanding for what each other wants. But if you can't actually execute that thing, even if it's just one sided, like you're doing it for them, they're not doing it for you, you're not building the relationship. And that's totally okay. And that's why trust is really critical. From a manager, I would argue trust is about, do I trust the quality of your work? Because anything that you do that requires a number of revisions is work they need to do. And I'm not suggesting that your work has to be perfect, but over time, if they trust your work, then you're going to have more free reign and you're going to build a relationship that's based on rapport. Someone naturally trusts you to say, hey, Tyler, I want today's episode to be about relationships. And I trust that Tyler's going to know what that means and know what kind of quality level that we need to meet in order to get this production ready. And if I trust you, that's a really strong relationship because you have free reign and you will have an opportunity to impress the manager. If I don't trust you, I'm micromanaging. I'm asking for multiple checkpoints on your review, and it just takes more time. And managers don't want to spend limited time that they have. So that's kind of, and then trust for like a senior executive is, can I trust that you've done your due diligence? Because senior leaders don't have time to click through every single bit of analysis. But over a long period of time and over a long delivery of work, senior leaders start to trust your delivery through a couple of things. Number one is triangulation of people they trust saying, you should trust Ben. Because if I'm a newbie, it's only my 30 days, but my manager, who's my director's report, and one of my director's partners, who I work with closely day to day, both say, hey, Ben or Tyler, you really should trust this person. They know what they're doing. And in my limited engagement with them, I deliver a quality piece of work that's got references, that's got data, that's been well thought out. Now that person's going to trust me and invite me back to the table. Or in the moments that I feel I have feedback to my manager, they're going to trust that that feedback comes from a thorough and well thought out place and not just me complaining, because everyone's complaining to senior leaders all the time. So it's the difference between, sure, they'll hear you out, but do they actually internalize the message and trust that you've done your due diligence? Well, that all depends on, again, starting from a personal connection to understanding their needs, right? Because that's still important. You need to understand the director's needs, down to building that trust.
100%. And I think, number one, thank you for trusting me to do this
Oh,
episode.
the trust is there for sure.
The trust is there. It built over years and years of doing stupid things until we
Yeah.
did at least, one or two right. But ultimately, I think that if I had to sum it up, it sounds like what you're saying is, from a leadership perspective, the trust is really in the your ability to kind of do the diligence, and also to a certain extent on your judgment in itself. Your managers trust that they really need to have in you is on your expertise and your ability to deliver. And your peers need to be able to trust you in terms of just psychological safety in space,
Yep.
as well as knowing that you're going to be a good collaborator with them. And I think that ultimately that's a pretty, I trust that point of view that you have, because I do think that ultimately these are kind of the mixture of things will make you very successful, because once people do trust you, the more kind of doors open for you.
Exactly.
Or like a peer might say, hey, I'm working this project, like, what do you think of this? The more manager might say, hey, there's this stretch project or opportunity over here, I would love for you to be considered. Or a leader might say, hey, we're starting up this new team, and like, you know what you're doing, and I'd love for you to be a leader on it.
Exactly.
So ultimately, again, all of these different folks who you're working with are going to have an impact on your day to day, and ultimately your career. But building this within the PUT framework is really, really important. So I'll kind of start with just a peer example and kind of how to put all three of these together, and maybe we can ping pong
Yeah.
a little
Let's
bit
do it.
about this. But from a peer perspective, I think what's really important with peers is that you think about how you build kind of this relationship through the big and the small. I think the big is really the P and the U of this is really where the big comes in. really understanding, like taking the time just to like understand who they are, where they come from, what motivates them, all these different things to find that common ground. It's worth your time to take the extra time to do that. Sometimes to folks I've talked to who aren't really the biggest fans of networking or are a little more on the introverted side, this feels hard. It is hard, but it is important because the more and more people know you and you know them, the more and more you can empathize and understand what each other are going through. And when you have that baseline of empathy, you'll be able to understand, like, oh, this person isn't delivering on the thing that I asked of them. I wonder if it's because this is going on. How can I be there for them to help make sure that they're doing okay, but also this thing actually ultimately happens? And so the big things you can do in that regard are just asking people how they are. It sounds small, but it's really, really a big thing because the answer to that question can either be a, I'm fine anyway, let's jump into it, or actually it's not going that great, but like if you'll talk with me for a few minutes, I might feel better and we can get through this. And that's really, really critical. And it leads to ultimately kind of the trust side of this, which again, we're talking big and small here. I'm going to start with small on the trust because I think the trust side of things is all about like visibility at the end of the day, and showing that you trust them in a more kind of visible environment. The example that I have is like the smallest thing you can do that can make the biggest impact is if you have a presentation or a document or you're sending an email or something that is going to managers or leaders, you're just putting their name on it to say like this person contributed and they were a big part of this, and this wouldn't be existent without them. And sometimes it's just that level of a gesture will make all the difference. And the more and more you do that type of a gesture, the more and more people are like, oh, this person, I can trust that they are not going to take credit or steal credit for work that I do. I can trust that they're going to give credit where credit's due and they're going to be a good person to work with. And so the little things like that, all the way to the big things of trust, like Ben was talking about earlier, of like, oh man, I'm out sick. I had a family emergency. My dog's in the hospital. Like, I'm just not in the mindset to do this. Can you please help to do this while I'm out? And then showing that you can kind of be there for people. Like, those are the types of gestures that help to build this in a way where that trust, going back to the word I used before, durable, really exists. And you can kind of keep on with these relationships with these folks in a way that is very kind of productive in a snowballing way, a positive snowball, if you will. So I'll pause there. Ben, any thoughts on kind of the peer side of the equation?
Yeah, exactly. And I think for my introvert friends, asking somebody directly, "What do you want?" can be a little daunting. So I fully acknowledge that. And I use the word triangulating a couple times, and so I would offer that. So if you're trying to build a relationship with like a senior on the team, still a peer, but like senior, sometimes seniors can be like a little hard to, bridge that gap. Triangulation is the idea of asking your peers that you're more comfortable with, "Hey, you have a relationship with Grouchy Tyler, like what is he into? Like, what's the secret sauce?" But like, as you ask more people these questions, you start to piece together the lowest common denominator across them, and you start there because not every relationship is going to be duplicate and the same, right? Like, that's just not how life works. But the common denominator in many cases is the first way, and that's true for trying to get info or insight on a manager. That's true for senior leaders, which I do all the time. If I go present to a senior leader, I'm asking anyone I know that's worked with them, how do they like information as part of understanding, right? Like, how do they feel about certain things? Do they trust this data source? Do they, trust this team to do this type of work? Or am I going to be presenting something that they're going to be like, I don't trust that, so you're not valuable. Your insight's not valuable to me. These are little tidbits that you can gather. And if you're not keen on just asking straightforward, or you can't, I'd offer that too.
100%. And I think as Grouchy Tyler, it's just because I'm hungry. So maybe like bring me some food and it'll work. No, I'm just kidding.
We're always going back to taco.
Always,
but
every road in life leads to tacos. If you
we need to change the pod beyond the taco, beyond the tortilla.
Maybe tortilla. Talks need to rebrand to Taco Talks, but I digress.
Oh, taco! Let's go. You are a marketer. Okay.
Sometimes I market. But no, let's to keep this rolling on. I definitely agree with what Ben's saying. But let's talk about managers for a second. Ben, can you give an example of kind of how you build things up with managers?
Yeah, exactly. So I gave the example of, and it looks like we may have lost Tyler, but that's okay. I will continue the show, and I'm sure he'll be back in just a second. So the way I think about building trust with managers is about delivering high quality work. If we think about the example that Tyler gave around like a presentation or a document or things like that, one of the things that you can do to show high quality work is first do the actual work. And I know this sounds straightforward, but like spending the time to do it, but then you can, I know many of us have been staring at a screen trying to figure out what perfect looks like in the case of whatever your manager expects. Triangulation helps. You can actually tap on some peers, especially if you're new. People will forgive you asking them for time and just say, hey, do you mind just quickly reviewing my deliverable for 5 minutes? A lot of times people are going to come in and say, sure, I'm down to help. And they're actually going to review it from the manager's lens. If you tell them this is going to the manager, similar to an email, instead of just, obsessing over the details of an email, you might want to put your email in a document and have your peers review it. So going back, Tyler, to triangulation, I see that you're back, saying when I deliver something to my manager, they are the intended audience. First, I'm going to do the actual deliverable for me because it's not necessarily a team project. So I'm going to do my first stab at it. But I might tap on some peers, especially if it's your first 30 days, because they'll be willing to help. They know you're new, and ask them feedback on what the managers might or may not ask for. And then over time, I'm also listening to what my manager is telling me for feedback, not just in the instance of this thing. Like I show Tyler a presentation. He does this all the time because he's someone I really trust. And he'll say, I wouldn't call it this. I wouldn't call it this. I wouldn't call it that. So that stuff is valuable to me. But what's even more valuable is understanding why what position is he in when he's telling me to make these changes. Oh, it's about branding. You're not thinking about branding implications to the thing that I'm trying to present. So now I know branding means a lot to Tyler because he's a brand marketer. And so I can use some of that to say, okay, I don't have to ask my manager to repeat that same element of feedback on a different deliverable. I'm going to say, by the way, here's my other deliverable a week later. And by the way, you don't have to ask or mention these points of feedback because I already incorporated. Ta-da! And so that demonstrates an intention, and I can't say a deliberate feeding in of the feedback, and also a willingness to grow and learn. And that also builds trust.
I think to that point, and I appreciate always being the random dude who chimes in on marketing and brand stuff. So I'm glad I could fill that void in your life. But no, I think ultimately what's interesting about building this kind of relationship with managers is that, as I think you can kind of piece from between what Ben's saying, it is a little less direct than peers. Where peers, it's like, hey, I need to get to know you. I need to like find this common ground stuff. You're doing that with managers, but you also have more data points, if you will. Your managers work with a lot more people on your team, your peers, other folks, and so you're piecing everything together from a multitude of conversations. The interactions that you have when they're giving a presentation to your team, the interactions that you see them have when they're presenting and an all hands are talking to a leader, you're constantly gathering these data points, and everything that you gather and understand can kind of go into that trove of understanding that you have about your manager. So it's not even just about the feedback loops that you have with them directly, but the indirect feedback loops that you see overall that can feed into kind of the relationship you ultimately build with them. On this one, before we move on to leaders, I did want to pose one question because I think, Ben, we've both been a manager. Like I mentioned, we both had a bunch of managers. Tell me a little bit about one of the best managerial relationships you have, whether it's, again, with one of your managers or with a report. And can you kind of tell me what created that relationship?
Yeah, actually, this is a really good opportunity to highlight that it's okay to have a manager relationship that's kind of rocky initially, because sometimes you might come out of that even stronger. That trust sometimes comes through tension and difficulties and not getting it right the first time. And I have a manager that essentially gave me my first shot into the tech space. I'm actually hoping we get him on. Tyler knows who I'm talking about. And he just pushed me. Like every day was a struggle to get stuff out the door. We all have this pusher, but through the grind and the difficulties, you come out a much more developed individual. And demonstrating your capability to growth is probably the most effective way to build trust. However, also sometimes a little stressful and also sometimes a little tenuous. But I think like not all relationships are going to be all happy and dandelions and flowers. So in many ways, if you have a really tough cookie as a manager, you can also build trust just through your own self-development. And I'm sure you've had sort of that manager as well in your lifetime.
100%. I was going to say, I mean, I don't want to double down on this example because you can just like have a good manager relationship out of the gate. That's awesome. It is super possible. But to this point, like one of the best managers I ever had is this exact thing where you
Yeah.
start tense and like you solve it. And it's almost like you mutually worked through it. Like you went to couples counseling almost and you like made your way through it. And now you're like golden. But similarly, I was a long time ago when I worked at Google, I was on a team, and the team entirely was based in New York except for me. I was the one dude who was kind of in Mountain View. And I worked at the Mountain View office, and there was a team that we worked with very closely. And that team had this manager who basically like would ask me to do something. And at that time, I was like, "You're not my manager. Like, I can't do all these things for you. Go talk to my manager in New York." And so he was really frustrated with me. And when we say, you know, relationships, you have these relationships, they build over time and kind of you never really escape them. They like are always there. As fate would have it, I eventually moved on to this dude's team. So the way that it started was very much like me being like, oh, I'm not going to do all this stuff for you. You're not my manager, to you're my manager now. Like, oh, and so now it was very much in that standpoint. I had to figure out like I have to understand this dude. I have to find more common ground. I have to really get like why he might have been asking me to do these things, why he was frustrated that I hadn't done these things, and by addressing some of that stuff directly and then showing him what I could do to the points that we talked about before and in building trust, like we all of a sudden had a great relationship. And then that type of stuff led into those projects that are so hard and the projects that really test your professional abilities. And then making it through a series of those together just like made our relationship so rock solid that I know I can go to this guy today, ask him any question, and he's going to help me out. And so, in any case, I think the moral of the story is sometimes, you know, things don't always look perfect and rosy out the gate, but they will ultimately turn into something better as long as you work hard and you think about these
You got to
parameters.
put in the work.
You got to put in the
Put
work.
you see you picked up what I dropped off right there. Let's go. All right, great place to end. Dad jokes. Let's go.
Seriously, I love that. No, but no, I think that's a good time to, you know, off of the back of Ben's very, very apt pun. Why don't we jump into leadership from here in the put framework? I'll start on this one because I think in my shoes right now, as many of you all listening know, I have my own marketing consultancy. I work with different businesses, and a lot of the time I'm interfacing with folks at all different levels. But leaders are a very, very important part of my job for two reasons. One, because they ultimately are the approvers of the work and also assigners of a lot of the work that I do as a consultant. But two, ultimately, like you want to, as someone like me as a consultant, you want to show them what you can do. And so ultimately, when they have a problem, they know that you're able to help them. Um, in any case, the reason that I want to talk about leaders a little bit is because leaders, again, you to emphasize what we talked about before, you do not get a lot of time with them. When I say that, what I mean is there are different levels of leaders. There are folks who may be a director level, for example, and a director level, maybe you touch base with them, you know, once every 2-3 weeks, you see them on a call or potentially in a presentation. Especially earlier in your career, there were times where in my first role, especially in the first 30 days, I maybe saw my director once in that time frame. And as I grew more senior, maybe I saw him like twice a month kind of thing. But as you go kind of further and further in your career, you'll start to interface with these folks more. And they'll remember you by the interactions you had. So the more interactions you start to have, the more they understand you, and the more you interface with them, the more that they're getting the full picture of you. So because you don't have that many touch points with them in kind of the beginning, especially in your first 30 days, the goal is to really understand, to what Ben has said, similarly to managers, one, ask around. Try to understand them a little bit from all of everyone's different perspectives. I think one thing you'll find when you kind of talk to learn about leaders with different folks is that there may be a variance of perspectives more than you see with managers. In that leaders, it can very much depend on the different, the kind of different what should I say, the different work streams that people have. Some people may have a work stream where they just had a presentation and it went great. Some people may have a work stream where they had a presentation, it didn't go well. They're like, oh no, this leader's terrible. The other person's like, this leader's amazing. And so you may find more polarized things on both ends of the spectrum. However, the more you ask around, the more you get to know them, is the better. And then the thing I would say is in the interface times you have with them, sometimes you'll find the leader is very down to business. The first few interactions you have with them, I would try to like just figure out what type of leader they are. I see Ben laughing. I'm like, did you have this moment recently?
No, no, no. I was gonna say it's good to caveat the put framework with like sometimes the order of operations needs to vary
Yeah.
depending on the appropriateness of the. You don't want to come in swinging with the hey, I stalked you on LinkedIn and I saw that you were part of a whatever fraternity group and it's probably been 30 years since you've been part of that, but I was part of a fraternity. Are you a friend? Like I'm using this very silly example, but like in a VP situation, you're probably going straight to understanding first. And then maybe at the very end, you might give an olive branch. Like so in this example that I used when I first met my VP, I was like introducing myself and I layered in that, I had done a number of jobs and then I also learning how to be a new dad. And she had previously shared pictures with us on like a winter break type thing, like, oh, I'm going to this place with my kids, and I just brought that up in passing, and then later in one of my second or third meetings with her, it just happened to be my son started walking that day, and so we come into the meeting, I'm like, hey, how's it going, blah blah blah. She's like, great, how are you? I'm like, I am just shaking with excitement on a personal note because my son just started walking and she was like, "Oh my god, like do you have the video? Like let me see it." I was like, "Yeah, I'll show you the video." Like and so the personal connection wasn't made in the first session, but you set the table for it. The personal connection was made in the second one where she just clearly was happy for me that I was a parent and my son started walking. So, I think it's also like long term PUT might be like multiple weeks, multiple months, you might come first and then you plant the seed for P and then later you bring that up later. Like there's a number of ways that you can do it. And with senior leaders, you have to just really think about what's appropriate. That's why I was laughing. I was like, I definitely don't be like, hey, I hear you're a parent. I'm a parent too. You want to talk, you want me to talk about my kid to you for 20 minutes? I could do that. That's not
No,
gonna work.
I think to be honest, you just summed up in a very short period of time through that example what I was trying to get at in what was taking a lot longer. So I appreciate that. In that, it's basically like sometimes it's just about being a little more calculated with leaders.
Exactly.
Like, you just have
Exactly.
to think through like, okay, is this the type of person that I need to listen to a little bit and understand? Is this the type of person I can just jump in? And it'll kind of become apparent through some of these conversations.
Exactly.
So it's like get your data points, and that's like talking to people, but also just seeing how they operate. And then when you feel comfortable with an approach, go for it. So being a little more calculated in that regard. I think honestly, at the end of the day, that works really well because again, these leaders, like you're going to be presenting to them and trying to get sign off, and they're going to be trying to understand things. And they're probably going to ask you a bunch of really hard questions. But
Yep.
the more that they understand who you are, the more that they're not going to look at you and basically try to make you fail, the more and more they're going to be supportive of you and try to be there so you both can win. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, that's kind of the mutual benefit they're going for, even when they ask you the hard things, and even if they may seem a little more abrasive than they actually are.
Yep.
The last thing I'll say on leaders, just going back to the whole put framework, and then I know we have to wrap up,
Yep.
but
Yep.
uh, is I find that a lot of people forget that leaders are people too.
Yeah. Yeah.
In some
Big
ways,
plus one.
like people generally, especially in your first 30 days, when you hear a leader's name, they feel like this like mythical being that's like,
Yeah.
oh man, they run the org. Especially in larger companies where some VP might have a team of 200, 400, like really really large teams. But even in small companies, that VP may have like a team of three, but that's an entire function in the company, so they
Yeah.
seem a little bit less accessible. But all that being said, they are people. They are going to have interests. There are going to be ways to find common ground. And even though you might not get the same amount of time with them, and you might not be able to ask them all the questions in the world that you want to ask them, just by being calculated, by taking the time, by looking at signs, by being very thoughtful and diligent about things, you will find an opportunity at some point in time to build that relationship. So on that note, I want
And
to
wait, really quick before, can I just add to that point as well? Like, I also, it's probably fair to say that the put framework is not going to yield 100%, as you were like alluding to. Like, if you do it right, you will get some success for sure. And like, to use myself as an example, I would say I'm definitely more of a relationship centered sort of employee relative to my peers. And so therefore I have more relationships relative to people similarly tenured to me. But like my relationship, success framework, whatever you would call it, like it's probably like 25%.
yeah,
Like you do all this work and there's no connection or there's no ability to impress someone feasibly in the 30 minutes a year you have with them. I You have to keep in mind too that's totally okay, and 25% or whatever percentage you achieve is a win. Anything greater than zero is a win. And that's what relationships are all about, right? Similar to how you can't be friends with everybody in the world because just it's not how friendship and relationships work. So wanted to similarly say like it's okay if you do all this work, all this intentionality, and then it just doesn't land. No problem. You move on and figure out who that next person is that you need to build a relationship with.
100%. I think on that note, I mean, it's a great time to do our one of
Yeah,
our casual wrap ups, which is just like, what's the one thing to take away from today? So, on the back of what you're saying, I'll kind of kick it to you to ask,
sure.
what's one thing you'll take away?
We need to change our podcast name to Beyond the Tortilla.
That's what I was. That's it. That's
Yeah,
it.
yeah. I guess the second thing um, is, you know, the framework that I'm offering out there, and there are many, ultimately oversimplifies a lot of moving pieces that make up a good relationship. But like at the end of the day, these are all components that you can use to piece together what works for you. And there are many, many, many other things beyond PUT. Like, for example, one thing I didn't put in my framework that matters is context. And so, like, the context of a relationship, if you're the manager and there's a direct, is going to fundamentally change relative to what we've talked about. So, like, at the end of the day, you make it yours and make the decision that you think is the best to build the best relationship. And then also stress patience because it will take time. And so that's why we want to bring in the first 30 so that you start now. And then eventually, when you're at 90 or 180 or a year, you feel like you have a strong foundation to build your relationships upon. How about you,
Yeah.
Tyler?
I mean, the patience was exactly what I was going to say, so I
Okay.
won't harp on it for too long. But in all the examples that Ben and I gave y'all today, it was always a slow burn. It was, the
Yeah.
manager relationship that over time got better, all these different things that were like we put the name in the presentation over and over and over again, and then the email over and over. These things are not like, hey, how's it going? I'm Tyler. Let's have a relationship. Dope. We're good now. Like it doesn't work that way. And there will be, to Ben's point, people you hit it off with, and that will help to accelerate as a catalyst that relationship. But there are going to be the people that you don't hit it off with that need a little bit more intention and attention if you want to kind of have that relationship. So patience is ultimately the name of the game. My like 1.5 thing to remember, because Ben stole mine, is remember that these relationships, we're talking first 30 days, but it really, really, really is career long. The things that you cultivate over time, these people don't disappear, especially if you stay in the same industry. These people move around. You'll see them again. They'll become your managers, your peers in different teams. They'll work on different things, and they'll be there. And so don't think of it as a short term game, and definitely don't think of it as I need this thing out of this person, get that
Yeah.
thing and then go away. Remember that things will come around in many ways. I have a lot of examples. You all saw my now wife Kira on one of our podcast episodes before,
That's
but
right.
she literally has gone to every B2B SaaS company under the sun and knows people at every single one every time she moves companies. And it's because your network and the people that you have relationships with, they will move around and you will see them again. So keep that in mind. But for now, thank you for listening to this episode, and the two of us yap half about tacos, half about relationships.
Best
Um,
podcast ever.
I love it personally. But anyway, tell your friends now. But no, we appreciate you tuning in, and we can't wait for the next episode of the first 30 day series. We hope you are enjoying this. If you are enjoying this, share it with your friends and give it to folks who might also benefit. And hit us up because we always want to hear more topics from you. But until next time, thank you again for tuning in to Beyond the Books. And remember, the best chapters in life are the ones that you write yourself. We'll see you next time.
All right. Happy relationshiping.
Happy relationship.